Hey friends, welcome back. We're in Numbers chapters 1 through 3 today. Welcome to the book of Numbers. We're moving along. We made it through Leviticus. Numbers is also one of those books that can slow us down if we're not careful. So we're going to try to be careful. This video is going to be a little shorter than some of them, only about 15 minutes max. So hang with me. Just want to make a few points in our reading here today. Here's my suggestion: don't try to read this primarily for how does this speak into my life or what's the application. We're reading primarily to try to understand the story, the big story of um, of what God is doing. So the opening chapter or two is not the most engaging, right? It's not the most gripping narrative. A lot of it is recounting of the tribes. So I think it's important though that we remember as we're tracking along here in the big picture. Um, and as we look at these numbers and as these people are counted in chapter 1, it's the men over the age of 20 who are being counted at this point. Why? Because they're of the fighting age. So we're told that in verse 3. um, as we start, by the way, let me start in chapter 1, verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the desert of Sinai. So the book of Leviticus has accomplished its task. Remember, at the end of Exodus, God's glory fills the tabernacle, but Moses can't get in. And so this is both the dwelling place of God's intense presence, also the tent of meeting, right? The meeting place between God and his people. And the idea of God dwelling among them must not be lost. This is meta theme, big stuff. So Moses is meeting with the Lord in the tent of meeting. Things are going okay, right, in that regard. So they're counting, again in verse 3, all the men of Israel 20 years or old or more and able to serve in the army. Okay, so we're getting an account here of as we come against an enemy in the taking of the promised land. Who do we have to work with here? But here's the thing that is standing out to me, not necessarily because it's the main point of this passage, but remember all the way back to Genesis chapter 12. You can even go back to Noah, even in that case, to think about God's promises, right? God's covenant promise. Remember when he made that promise to Abraham and reiterated it a couple of times that his children would be like the stars in the sky or the sand on the seashore, too many to be counted. But there's that period of time where he didn't have any kids. So what do you mean all this promise, God, of all these descendants, right, when I can't even have one? Well, look at this when we're counting these numbers, these tens of thousands just of men in this particular age range. We can see, wow, and as you move into the totals within this category, which is, remember, just men age 20 and up for the army there, the fighting force kind of potential. Where was I? Verse 46 of chapter 1, the total was 603,550. Just those guys, right? So, wow, look where we've gone. And this is all from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, who is also named Israel, and his 12 sons and their families. This 603,000, just men 20 and up, is this family, is God's promise. Even he told Jacob when they went down to Egypt that the people would become more numerous in that land. So we can see here, even in this boring section, right? God's promise coming to a substantial fruition. Look at all of these descendants in this one big family who is this people of God. So that's I don't know. I think that's just that's kind of cool. We have a lot in here about the Levites. So Levi, remember, is one of the 12 sons of Jacob, Israel. But that family from whom Moses and Aaron, brothers, right, are Levites. So all the priests are going to be in the Levites, the Levitical family. Remember the book of Leviticus. So we're seeing this Levi thing all working its way through. They have special responsibility. Some of them are in this priestly line of Aaron and Aaron's sons that will come up again, I think, in chapter 3 here. We're in 1 through 3 today. But the Levites are responsible for the tabernacle, all things tabernacle, not just the offering sacrificial system, but moving the thing. And so they're actually given specific instructions, because of the holiness and the sanctity and the penalties for messing with that. They're given specific responsibility for how to do that. So they'll continue to be unique in some significant ways in their roles in the story. They're having in verse 53, they're having their tents set up in special proximity to the tabernacle. In that, and for moving all the stuff, the tent, the poles, everything, the stuff inside, that's all their responsibility. Nobody else is to touch any of it. It's all the Levites' special task. In chapter 2, we're told how, and again, if this feels boring to you, this is so that they could know what God wanted. All of these descriptions of how to do things throughout Leviticus, and here they're told what God. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to fight about it. They don't have to, kind of negotiate for whatever. God said, "This is exactly how I want you to set up my camp. This is exactly how I want you to arrange yourselves around the camp." And so, chapter 2 has that, the description. And they're all encircled around. Remember, God dwelling in their midst as this meta theme is physically manifest in the way that it wasn't like the tabernacle's here and then they're all in rows behind it. They're all around the tabernacle, the meeting place, the place of God's presence, and all the camps are arranged around it so that the idea of God dwelling in their midst is shown in the way that they're actually like setting up camp. And remember, they're mobile. This is not a town. This is a traveling deal at this point in time here along the way. And it will be for, as we'll learn in Numbers, for 40 years. That wasn't their initial expectation, but that was the reality for a reason that we'll see. And they go, when it's time to go out, they go out in their order. So a lot of this is description of that. And then verse 34, chapter 2 is important. So the Israelites did everything the Lord commanded Moses. This, when you see this, is not just a throwaway. This is a big deal, because remember, they didn't always do that. Remember the golden calf? There's some major issues. But when it says they did everything the Lord commanded, that's thumbs up. That's what we want. God says, here's how to do it. They do it. It shouldn't be that hard, but sometimes it is, right? But that's a good thing. So the Levites, chapter 3 is pretty much all about the Levites, this one tribe that has this special role. Chapter 3, and we see about Aaron and his sons, mostly not new information there, but rather repetition. And the Levites are collectively, not just in their task of moving the tabernacle, but in who they are is special. Verse 9, chapter 3. Give the Levites to Aaron and his sons. They are the Israelites who are given holy with the Wholly, holy to him. Um, Again, some people are uh, given wholly, completely, like the burnt offering, over to the Lord, with the idea that ultimately that's the goal for everybody, for the whole of the people, and then ultimately for others as well to become wholly given over to God. So look at verse 11. This is important in following. The Lord also said to Moses, I have taken the Levites from among the Israelites in place of the first male offspring of every Israelite woman. This thing about the firstborn being firstborn, first fruits, right? The first being God's special possession, uniquely God's. And we're again connected back into the story as it's gone on. It goes back to Egypt and the Passover. Remember the final, the worst plague was the death of the firstborn, and the Passover of the people that put the blood on their doorposts prevented the death of those Israelite firstborn males or baby boys. But in the Passover, God says that they're now, because I saved them from that death, they're now uniquely mine. Okay. But how it's going to work is that the Levites, as this whole clan, all of them, the men, the women, the firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn, whatever, are going to become representatives of all of those firstborns. And so they're going to be counted. We'll see that in a minute, but we see it there. Again, I'm not just asking you to remember that. This text is saying that. Look at, again, Numbers 3, verse 13. For all the firstborn are mine. When I struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, I set apart for myself. This is this idea of, right, consecration, holiness, being set apart. I set apart for myself every firstborn in Israel, whether human or animal. Even the firstborn of the flock are God's. Right? We've read about this some already in Leviticus. They are to be mine. I am the Lord. And then it's gone through some of the what's it called? The clans. The clans, the sons of Levi, like the family, the kind of larger family units. In chapter 3, they're each responsible for different aspects of this moving of the tabernacle that we talked about. That, you know, you're in charge of the poles, you're in charge of the furniture, you're in charge of this, so that everybody knows what to do, what they're responsible for when it comes time for the camp to move on. And then in verse 18, Moses and Aaron, they're in front of the tent of meeting. They're ultimately responsible in that. So at the end of the end of that section, so in verse 39, the total Levites, that includes every male a month or more old, was 22,000. Okay, 22,000 of the Levites. Then verse 40. Okay, so this is a basic math problem here, that's about all I can handle. So that many Levites. Verse 40, the Lord said to Moses, count all the firstborn Israelite males who are a month old or more, and make a list of their names. Take the Levites for me in place of, right? So there's this idea of substitution in place of. These become themes, right, throughout Scripture. In place of all the firstborn of the Israelites and of the livestock of the Israelites, in place of all the firstborn livestock of the Israelites. I am the Lord. So God says, I have the right to have the claim on every firstborn male from among my people. But what we're going to do is take all of the Levites in place of them for this unique role, this unique ministry, if you will, of this tabernacle, the presence, the housing of the presence of God, And so we're doing the math. We're going to see what's going on here. And as it turns out, the number is 22,000, which is how many Levites there are, but 273. Okay, so there's a is a remainder. My math terminology is off there. There's 273 more Israelite firstborn males than there is Levites. So we got potentially a problem. It's not, because God says, verse 44, the Lord said to Moses, take the Levites in place of all of the firstborn of Israel, and the livestock of the Levites in place of mine. I am the Lord. Okay, so redeem, verse 46, to redeem the 273 firstborn Israelites to exceed the number of the Levites, collect 5 shekels for each one. According to the sanctuary shekel, which weighs 20 gerahs, give the money for the redemption of the additional Israelites to Aaron and his sons. So God says, here's what's going to happen. There's going to be a cost for the redemption of the overage, if you will, the excess amount of people from the Levites. And this reminds us kind of this idea of, we see terminology like redemption happening throughout the biblical story, including the New Testament. And it makes me think of teaching like, you are not your own, you were bought at a price, right? So these kind of ideas, it's not a one-to-one there, but again, we see these kind of themes that start to roll through Scripture as we go. So, all right, I'm going to stop there. Shorter video today. First 3 chapters of Numbers. Next time we're moving on. It's going to get interesting. Okay. The book of Numbers is not all about counting numbers. That's part of it, but there's a lot more happening here. I think Numbers is going to be, some of it at least, is going to be more interesting than you think it's going to be. But the goal is not, is this interesting? The goal is not necessarily, how does this verse apply to my life? Although there'll be times when those things do. But the question is, are we understanding what's going on in the story? Are we understanding the themes that are building as we move forward in the story? The promises, like I mentioned earlier, that are now already coming to fulfillment in all kinds of ways. This is good news. We see this here. God's covenant promise to Abraham is coming true. God's promise to dwell among them, we've seen, is happening. This is good news. This is good stuff here. Okay? Big picture. All right. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.